Welcome to the OOUX Podcast, a podcast about tackling complexity head-on, gracefully organizing massive amounts of information, and designing scalable, future-proof, and of course, naturally intuitive object-oriented user experiences. An OOUXer is a powerful blend of information architect, business analyst, facilitator, and UX strategist. If this sounds like you or what you aspire to, you are so in the right place. I'm Sophia Prater, UX designer, chief evangelist of object-oriented UX, and your host. Let's jump into it. What's up, OOUXers? Welcome to the Object-Oriented UX Podcast. Today is a solo episode. Today's a special episode. I'm going to be talking about something that has been getting me really jazzed the last couple weeks, probably the last couple months, actually. And I also wanted to announce that we are going to be taking a short break, maybe a longer break, for the OOUX podcast. So probably just a couple months. We'll probably pick back up in the fall, but we've got a lot of stuff going on. So we did slow down. We went from every other week to every 3 weeks. And right now we're just going to go and focus on some other big projects, get those out the door, things that have just been hanging over my head like an axe. No, actually really exciting things, such as collaboration with Joe Natoli that I've been working on. We are going to be relaunching Cross-Linked, the OOUX card game. Honestly, I really want to go beyond some other podcasts. I was on a few. I was on UI Breakfast, which was really great. Got really great exposure for OOUX, as well as Jorge Arango's podcast. That was really amazing too. I've got one coming up, but if you could help me out here, go and so I know you listen to other UX podcasts. I know you do. So some of your favorite hosts or your favorite other UX podcasts, go reach out to those hosts on Twitter or LinkedIn and just poke them. Tell them that they should that they need to interview me, so that when I do reach out to them, at least one person will have already said, "Hey, you should have Sophia Prater on your podcast." Yeah, I would like to kind of go around. If you're a podcast host and you're listening, hi, reach out. And let's talk. So kind of want to go beyond some other podcasts. Also, we just wrapped up cohort 6. What an amazing cohort. They are in their testing window right now. So just wrapped up cohort 6, did so many upgrades to the certification program, got so many more ideas. We have, of course, We've been moving away from Trello, doing our object mapping within the requirements round, and we are now pretty committed to using Notion. This is the first time we officially used Notion, and it worked out really, really well. So another thing that I'm going to be doing this summer is going through the requirements videos. So much of them have Trello in there, and we're really just going to be making the course as tool agnostic as possible. So that's not something I thought of a year ago when we were recording. Live and learn. We just changed tools so much, right, in this industry. So really those recordings need to be more evergreen. Everything that you do within this process, you can do on a piece of paper. So there's no real tools that you need. We just have templates and lots of different tools. And a lot of those are kind of gummed up in the videos. So we'll be doing a little bit of re-recording most likely this summer as well. So we've got a lot going on. So that's why the podcast is just going to sit on the back burner for just a few months. It's not going away. I enjoy doing this so much. So please don't unsubscribe. Don't do that. Don't unsubscribe. Stay subscribed. And then it'll just be a nice treat when a new episode pops back in the fall, maybe the winter. We will see. But we will be back. So I wanted to kind of wrap up this season. I don't know if we have seasons. Wrap up this spurt of podcasts with a solo episode to talk about what I've been really excited about. So that is the ORCA Sprint. So what is this ORCA Sprint? Sophia, why are you so excited about it? So, yes, hat tip to Jake Knapp. I finally read Jake's book, Sprint. Had it for, I don't know, years. Finally read it, and I was super inspired by the accessibility of it, how it just seems really fun, so collaborative. It's structured. It's got like this right amount of structure, but with still a little bit of flexibility, and it can apply to lots of different things. And with OOUX and the ORCA process, we already have so much of that. It's like we have all of the pieces, and I just realized I hadn't put it together in this really smart format. So honestly, as I was reading the book, I was just sketching. I don't know if you have the book. The inside flap is kind of a diagram of the week, the Monday through Friday Google Design Sprint week, and I'm just writing over it. I'm just sketching over it. Okay, what would the OOUX version of this be? And I really see these two things working really well together. Like you could do one of those Google Design Sprints, and whatever comes out of that, you could then go do an ORCA Sprint on the heels of that, or vice versa. I actually don't know. I feel like they could kind of like work. This isn't saying, oh, don't do Google Design Sprints, do it this way. This is saying that, hey, the Google Design Sprint doesn't have a whole lot of detailed information architecture in it, right? You just don't have time for that. It doesn't mean it's not valuable, but this could be that. I think it will be that. So basically what the ORCA Sprint is it goes through the ORCA process. And I realized, oh my gosh, okay, so the ORCA process has 4 pillars that lead you straight into sketching and prototyping. So what we've got here is we've got objects on Monday, we've got relationships on Tuesday, we've got calls to action on Wednesday, we have got attributes on Thursday, and then that leads you into sketching and prototyping on Friday. So basically what you start the week off with a vague idea of a problem or a goal you're trying to achieve. Start off from noun foraging all the way into prototyping. Fitting in testing in that week, I think, is a little bit too much of a stretch. So you'd end the week with that prototyping, and then be ready to take that prototype into some testing. It might need a little bit, to build out some scenarios or something, maybe a little bit more time the next week to get into. You could go ahead and schedule testing for like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the next week to test that prototype. So how cool is that? Exciting, right? So today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be actually walking you through that structure, the idea of that. But first I want to just talk I just want to take a trip down memory lane and talk about how I got to this point, because I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. This structure is totally conceptual right now. It has been in my head. I have run OOUX ORCA sessions with clients in every which way possible. I've spent 3 years OOUXing with clients. I have spent 8 weeks OOUXing with clients. I have spent 2 days OOUXing with clients. I have spent 4 hours OOUXing with clients. And I'm taking the same tools, the tools that keep evolving and improving, but really these same fundamental pieces and remixing them, right? Remixing them for the particular scenario, the particular time frame, the particular audience. And so I've just been doing this since 2014. Have I put it into this exact process that I'm going to talk you through? No, I don't have time right now. So what I'm doing is I'm putting it out into the zeitgeist. So I'm going to talk through it with you today. I also have a Notion Kanban board, basically visualizing it. So the link is going to be in the description. It's duplicatable. So you can grab that link. Also, it would be probably helpful if you're not walking or driving or anything, to actually look at that link, open it up on your computer and kind of look through it, or just listen to me kind of tell the story of what I'm just going to paint a picture for you of what that week would look like, going through this process. And then you can go back and you can find the link and you can copy it and you can, delete the stuff you don't want, add stuff you want, and then get back to me. Tell me how it goes. So I already know there's definitely some OOUX strategists that are planning to do this, that have already kind of worked with their team, and they're going to be giving me feedback on this. So I'm really looking for feedback. Also, if you are interested, after you hear me talk through this, in having me coach your team through this, I would be interested to talk. Got some availability coming up in like July and August to run one of these. So I definitely do want to try it. It sounds so fun. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, definitely reach out. Let's talk. Because what I've been doing, so to kind of go back to how I've got to this point, I've been using OOUX with clients since 2014, starting with when I first started Rewired back in 2014. I was really using OOUX for startups because that was my niche. I was just consulting to startups in the Atlanta area, working mainly with developers. And of course, the developers were like, yeah, this is awesome. Just keep doing this. And it was a lot of me going and doing the work and then reviewing it and me teaching them how to look at an object map. So it would be me and the developer, engineer founders, right? And I would build out the object map. We would collaborate on it. And then I would start building screens from that, and they would start building and changing or manipulating the back end to kind of match that model, which worked really, really well. This is a perk that I always talk about, of wireframes no longer become so much of a bottleneck with this process because you can work with your developers and then go do the wireframes while they're fixing stuff on the back end, because there's going to be things like, oh, these objects don't connect right now, or we need to add this attribute, or we need to build this API. So anyway, I was doing a lot of that work. I started working with bigger and bigger companies. Shout out to 9 Labs and Coolblue, 2 agencies in Atlanta who I worked with in the 2017, 2018, 2019 era, mostly 2017 era, who they had bigger clients. So again, shout out to Jay Cornelius of 9 Labs bringing me into Delta Airlines, which just got to do amazing stuff, which really was like, I would say that the work that I did with Delta was very close to what I'm going to talk you through now. Definitely not as structured, but we had 25 people fly in from all over the world. It was for a B2B app, and they were all users of the system. So they were subject matter experts and they were users. And a lot of what you're going to be hearing about today started in those 3 days where really we just had to solve the problem. I wasn't trying to necessarily teach object-oriented UX, which is so much of what I do now when I go into teams. I'm just teaching them how to fish. I'm not getting them a fish, right? We're not solving when I go and I teach workshops today, we're using a fake design challenge, because it's really just through learning that during these training sessions, trying to actually solve a problem and train people on OOUX was just too much. It was too much multitasking. So, they would get bogged down with all the baggage of their actual problem. So it worked a lot better in a training scenario to just use a fake design challenge, often something that would be similar to what they were working on, or maybe kind of like a skunkworks project or something like that. So maybe in the same domain, but often not. Often we would just look for certain corollaries to choose the design challenge, but it wasn't actually trying to solve a problem. So anyway, all of that to say, there's a long history of coming up to this point, but I'm really looking for your feedback. I'm looking for you to go try this out and tell me how it goes. So go use this, give me feedback. I'll continue to roll all your feedback into this, so we can make this ORCA Sprint together just a really, really effective way to solve a problem and to get to really amazing structure and information architecture, really solid functionality, and really get our objects, our relationships, our calls to action, our attributes organized in a way that gets us to amazing foundation of design and getting us queued up for really great interaction design, a really strong design system, all the other things that the ORCA process does so well. Okay, so who should be involved? Who should be involved in this week? So if you're looking at the Notion template, you'll see that I have some very macro groups here. So you're definitely going to need an OOUX lead. So somebody that's kind of like the facilitator, right? So that could probably just be one person. You're going to want your design team or representatives from your design team, probably at least one representative from research. You're going to want your stakeholders for sure. I lump in stakeholders and subject matter experts and kind of other business roles like managers. I have that all in as stakeholders. You might want to split that out a little bit more. But all of those people, definitely representatives from your from the dev side. So a technical architect, a dev lead should be in there. Content strategy and content design, I also lump in with the design umbrella, but those folks should definitely be included too. Information architecture, all of those I kind of lump in under design. So really everybody, I didn't mention marketing, but somebody from marketing would be really, really great too. But really, especially if one of the marketing folks, like a CMO or a marketing lead, is one of your stakeholders, they would be really great to have. And taking a cue from Jake Knapp, I think it's a really great idea to have a decider. So who is the person that, when it's a toss-up, makes the decision? Who is the person that is approving this step-by-step? That is not the OOUX lead. The OOUX lead is the one facilitating and bringing everyone through, and still has veto power that like, wait, no, that's actually not an object. I promise you that's not an object. That's going to be metadata that has that visibility and can kind of see the future because they understand the process. But you really do need a deciding factor as well. So some sort of decider needs to be part of this. For this week, not everybody is going to be full-time. So that is one thing that's different about an ORCA Sprint and Google Design Sprint. Google Design Sprint is very clear. You have the same people. They're locked in a room for 5 days. That I know is really, really tough and kind of unrealistic, right? So sometimes unrealistic, depending on your scenario, from what I've heard. It's a little unrealistic or difficult to have people full-time for a week. Your OOUX lead is going to be your one full-time person for this week. Other designers will be, it depends on how much they need to be involved. Everybody else is going to kind of come in and out and would have most likely about a 90-minute to a 2-hour session in the morning and then a 1 to 2 hour session in the afternoon wrapping up. Your decider does not need to be there all the time. The decider is going to be in there mostly for the reviews. Because usually that person is very, very busy, right? So it's kind of designed, and if you're looking again at the Notion template where I've tagged for the different activities across this sprint, I've tagged these different roles or groups. These are like the people that you really want to have. I mean, it'd be great to have everyone the whole time, right? Like that would be amazing if everyone can just block out the whole week. But if that's unrealistic, you can kind of have people floating in and out depending on what the activity is. Okay. How many people overall? I would say I'm thinking around like 10 to 12 people overall as the core team. You might have more people coming in for the reviews. Okay, so this is something that I think is going to be up for experimentation on how many people is the right amount of people. For a lot of these exercises, you're going to probably want no more than about 7 people. If you do have more people, you can always split out when it's time for kind of group work and discussion. You could always split it out into smaller groups. That does require more time for synthesis, though, because then you got to synthesize everything that happened with all those different groups, right? So that does, if you have a bigger group, it might not fit into a week, if that makes sense. Okay. So before we get into the breakdown and I sort of paint this picture on what the week looks like, I'm going to talk through it all. Hopefully it's going to be interesting and exciting. I'll try to make it interesting and exciting. Before we get to that, if this is the first OOUX episode podcast, if this is the first episode of the OOUX podcast that you are listening to and you are new to OOUX, bookmark this and come back to it. Like if you don't know what nested objects are, if you don't know what noun foraging is, if you don't know what a CTA matrix is, this is probably not the best place to start. So this episode is really for folks that are using object-oriented UX, that have read quite a few of the articles, that have listened to the podcasts, who have gone through the certification or gone through the masterclass, or at least the fundamentals workshop. And you can see all those, OOUX.com/training. If you've gone through any of those training programs or really have just read a lot of the free resources, then you're going to be fine. You'll understand what I'm talking about here. But if you are new to OOUX, feel free to take a listen. But I'm not going to necessarily explain. I'm going to mention the CTA matrix and I'm not going to really explain much about it. So I'm going to assume that you basically know the high, at least the basics. You basically know the basics of the ORCA process. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. What happens on Monday? All right. So Monday, I cheat a little bit. Oh, and each one of these days, I've added up the hours. It's about a 6 to 7.5 hour day, not including a lunch break. So they're tight days. They're kind of long. It's going to be, it's a I'll say it's a grueling week. Not impossible. Definitely for that UX lead, it's going to be a tough week. So they get a little bit of time off the week after. They're going to come in late the next Monday. So it's going to be a big week for them. For everybody else, no day goes over 8 hours. Okay, let's just say that. So on Monday, and this is my one little cheat. This might actually happen before. This can happen Monday morning, but maybe this happens the week before to get a little bit of a head start. And that's gathering materials for noun foraging. So we start the process with noun foraging, but you first have to figure out what you're noun foraging for. So you probably also need a loose idea of scope, if possible, right? Although the scope is going to get further defined in the process, that's what OOUX and the ORCA process does really, really well. It helps define scope. But it's good to come with a defined problem, even if that's just, what should we focus our efforts on next? Or it could be as specific as, how do we improve the membership management process for customers and admin? But you might even already have honed down into a part of your system or a feature of your system that you want to take through this process. That's great. So you should have a loose idea, but it can be very high level. That's okay. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find what materials are going to be used for the noun foraging activity. So when it comes and you have everybody in a room, you already have materials that you can disseminate to everybody and they can start going crazy with the noun foraging and circling nouns and having fun with that. So you're going to want to look to this. You might collaborate with your research partner on this, other designers as well, and just listing out okay, we've got some user interviews. We've got those transcripts, or maybe we don't even have transcripts. We just have the audio. So we've got user interviews. We've got the current application. So current state is always a good thing to noun forage from, for sure. A competitor, potentially. So you can noun forage from a competitor. Wikipedia articles on the domain of an online forum where your users, if you have very specific business users, a forum where they hang out just so you can hear their language. Customer service logs, chat logs. Oh, customer service logs are great. And, oh my gosh, there's so many places you can noun forage from. Those are just a few. Vision documents are another one. So you're deciding, okay, what do we have to work with here to go noun foraging? Organize that as best as possible and maybe have an idea on who's going to be in the room and who you're going to assign what to. Okay, it should be about enough material that would take about 45 minutes to go through. We're going to have about 45 minutes to have heads down noun foraging, and you're going to divide and conquer. So you're really figuring out, okay, here's all our sources. I've gathered my sources, and I have a good idea on who I'm assigning what to, so that when you got everybody in a room, you feel really prepared. Okay. So that's the prep work, right? That's really all the prep work you need. Okay. All right. So we might want to have some decks ready too, because I got some explainers in here. I don't think we could go in completely cold. So once you get everybody in a room, a Zoom room or a physical room, the first thing you want to do is spend about a half an hour, and this is optional, but I think is really important, spend about a half an hour reviewing the benefits of object-oriented UX. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? The basics of humans think in objects, collaboration with developers. Hi, developers, you're here too. Wonderful. We're all here together. More elegant design system, reduced rework, all the things that we talk about on this podcast. If you're looking for more on this, you can go to our collection. If you go to OOUX.com/resources and scroll down, you'll see all of our collections. And we've got a collection called Making the Case for Object-Oriented UX. There's a great article by Rick Williams on all the benefits of object-oriented UX. There's a lot of stuff in there if you need to kind of glean stuff that is going to resonate with the team. But just to make sure everybody's excited. Like this is kind of the raw pump everybody up. Just 30 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes. Here's the main reasons why we're doing this. A shapeshifter audit, if you have not done one of those on your current system, flashing that shapeshifter audit up on your screen to show, look at all this extra work that we're doing. That might just be enough. So whatever you think, or if the group is already completely sold on it and already excited about it, maybe you don't need to do this. So this is an optional thing, half hour at the most. Then going into a lecture on just an introduction to objects, okay? So making sure everybody understands what's the difference between an object, a component, an instance. Bringing in masked objects is great here to show, like, okay, again, like this is what we're trying to avoid. We want to make sure our objects are really recognizable. And then introducing SIP. So that is what they're going to need to be thinking of when they're going through noun foraging. So that is an acronym that stands for structure, instances, and purpose. Okay, so going through that, saying, okay, what are we actually looking for while we're noun foraging? And then explaining noun foraging. All right, what's about to happen? What are you going to do? So this is sort of just kicking them off so they have the least effective dose of tools that they need to be really effective when they go into noun foraging. Okay, now we go into noun foraging. So I've blocked out about 90 minutes for this. So distribute your materials, make sure nobody has any questions, put on some really good music, put on some chill hop. I've been listening to instrumental trap recently. That's really fun. So yeah, whatever is good work music you're going to need a good playlist. Definitely have that prepared because there's going to be a lot of heads down work where people just need to work individually and then you discuss. That's kind of true throughout the whole week. So what you want to do here, divide and conquer, distribute the materials, and then people are going to be going through those materials. They're going to be noun foraging, finding the nouns that get used over and over and over again. Give them about 45 minutes for that. Okay. If folks are burning through, have extra materials or let people switch to and like review somebody else's noun foraging. That could work too. But you should have more than enough to go on for 45 minutes. And then at about 45 minutes, ask them to take about 15 minutes to start distilling it down, okay? And say, okay, what are the ones that keep coming up over and over again? What are some synonyms? Get them down and you pick the number. So if you're trying to keep it, I would say, I'll give you a number here. Say 10. Say 10. Maybe you say 8, maybe you say 5, depending if you're crunched for time or if your system is really simple, but most likely it's going to be about, people should have no problems struggling to figure out what their 10 objects are. Tell them to pick their top 10 objects. And then ask them for those top 10 objects to give a couple instances or examples of each of those objects. If they have time, write a quick definition. So that's about 15 minutes to distill it down, give some examples, just jot down some definitions. And then you're going to go around and you're going to discuss it. So this is, however you want to have this on some sort of board. Well, I'll probably be making a template in Whimsical for this. I have not done it yet though. But basically now you're discussing, you're showing your cards. Okay, what 10 objects does everybody have? And what is the overlap and what are the differences? Is somebody using a different word for the same thing? Can we consolidate those? So now you start consolidating even more. So after this about hour and a half session, your team can disseminate. Okay, so now we're looking probably after lunch, midday, early afternoon. You're going to take all of that material and consolidate it. Okay, so now you're going in, all right, and you are, with everybody's top 10, pulling it together into a manageable glossary. So look at the frequency of objects, eliminate any non-objects, prepare explanations of why you're eliminating those. Like this actually could work a lot better with metadata. So this consolidated list might not be 10. It might be more like 10 to 15. And that gets you ready to bring in the last session where everybody comes back together at the end of the day. I've got 2 hours blocked out for this. Maybe it can be done in an hour, but this is what I call Object Survivor. So everybody comes back together. This is really a great time to have your researcher and also your decider needs to be here for this one. So your decider should probably have been there for that first session where you're reviewing benefits. Your decider does not need to be doing the noun foraging and going through that rigmarole, but you want to bring your decider back in for this. So now you have your objects. You've got a couple example instances, so it gets really, really clear what are these things. A definition is great. If you can write up a definition, go over that with everybody. Make sure, do we all have a clear picture on what these things are? Okay, do we have any questions about these things? Because you're about to vote on them. So we want to make sure it's really clear what we're voting on, right? So what you want to do, make sure everybody's clear, make sure all the definitions make sense, adjust those definitions if needed, rewrite some definitions, tweak, and then after everybody gets clear, give everybody this is going to be a rule for dot voting all the way through. However many objects you end up with, just cut it into 1/3 and give people that many dots. So if you've got 10 objects, give them 3 dots to vote on, okay? So then go into dot voting, all right? And then after voting, discuss, and your OOUX lead and your decider are going to make the final decision on the objects moving forward. For an ORCA Sprint, I recommend 5 to 6 objects. Unless you've done this a few times and you're with some experts, you can maybe handle 7 or 8 objects in a week-long sprint. I'm thinking I could probably handle 8 objects. So if you've been doing this for a while, then maybe you could do a few more. But I would try to stick to it, especially this is your first rodeo, stick to 5 objects. You're going to have to make a call to, as you're consolidating here, throughout the day, really. If the scope wasn't super clear to start with, are we going broad? Are we figuring out like our big, most important macro objects? Or are we going to kind of hone in on a part of our application and do all the objects in that part of our application? So you're starting to scope in on what are you doing? Are you doing this big macro thing? Or are you kind of focusing on one area and actually picking out some of those more detailed objects? All right, Tuesday. Tuesday is all about relationships. So you'll start the day, half-hour lecture max, just an introduction to relationships. You'll want to talk through cardinality, so people can maybe do a quick cardinality exercise, make sure nested objects are really clear, maybe go through isolated objects, right? So this is what we don't want to do. We want to make sure our objects are really connected within our screens. Show lots of examples of nested objects, even in your existing system. This is how they actually nest currently, and really making sure people understand cardinality. So the first exercise you're going to go into with the team is relationship spaghetti. So this is going to be some 3-up system modeling. All right. So what you do as the OOUX lead is pick 3 objects and let folks do a 3-object system model. So I think this is good to do in groups. So if you have about 10 people, maybe split it out into 3 to 4 groups. And then make them do like these simple little system models, okay? So say, all right, I want you to do, okay, let's just do something simple. I should have had an example in my head. Let's do a conference site, okay? So you're going to have, let's say, speakers and locations and talks. Okay, go. All right, go through that. Let them spend about 10 minutes on that. Discuss that, okay? Do this about 3 times. Rinse and repeat until you've really figured out, kind of like covered all of your bases, right? You don't need, if you have 5 or 6 objects, sometimes even a 5 to 6 object system model can be too much for people coming into OOUX. So just doing like these little mini ones, or even just 2 at a time. Speakers and talks. What are the relationships? Okay. Locations and venues. Wait, locations and venues are 2 different things in the system. So how do those relate to each other? And then locations, venues, and speakers. So you get the idea. Topics, talks, and tracks. How do those all intertwine with each other? So what you're trying to do here is you're just trying to generate a bunch of little system models that then you can go back. So after this, I blocked out 2 hours for this. You might not need 2 hours. You might be able to do this in an hour. 2 hours of this relationship spaghetti, boxes and arrows, drawing lines, getting that cardinality, getting them to describe those relationships with cardinality and other descriptors as well, really describing the nature of those relationships, getting into discussions, getting into debates. And then what you're going to do while everybody else goes and takes a break or does other stuff, you as the OOUX lead will take all of those system models and consolidate them down into a nested object matrix. Okay, nested object matrix is for people that are fresh eyes on the OOUX process can be a little bit much. Small system models works the best to really elicit as many relationships as possible. So you bring it into the nested object matrix, you consolidate all those system models, do gap analysis, gather your questions, gather discrepancies. If you're like, okay, this group is connecting locations and venues in this way, and this group is connecting locations and venues in a totally different way. Let me make sure to put this in a question parking lot so that when we come back together, we can ask about this. So you're highlighting areas for questions. That's also going to be a theme throughout this entire week, is grabbing questions that can be fed back into research, okay? So you're going to be figuring out what some of those questions are based on discrepancies or things that just don't make a whole lot of sense to you maybe. Also doing gap analysis, seeing if there's any with the nested object matrix. That's really helpful to see, okay, what about some recursive relationships? How do talks relate to talks? How do speakers relate to speakers? Often those are missed in our system models. So the nested object matrix is really helpful with that, okay? Track as best as possible who to address for which questions. So like, oh, team 1 put this, connected venues and locations this way, and team 2 connected venues and locations that way. Okay, let's get these guys to talk. Let's get them to duke it out. Okay, so you are pulling that together, the nested object matrix. Maybe take a little lunch break for yourself. And then early afternoon, you're going into nested object survivor. Okay, so we've got a survivor exercise in each of these days. So we had object survivor yesterday. Now we've got nested object survivor. And yes, CTA survivor is coming tomorrow. So nested object survivor, basically brief intro to the structure of the nested object matrix, how to read it like a sentence. So you read the host object, you read the nested objects, review any new nested objects, bring up those questions, identify any nested objects that are very conceptual and maybe good for more research. Like, do these things actually need to connect in this way? That might go into a research pile. Maybe not. We won't move forward with those. Also, this is a really good place to give your developers veto power to just nope any nested objects that definitely need to be phase 2. So you can debate. The decider might be like, no, y'all are going to figure that out. So there might be some debate there, but really open the floor to the developers to say, do you see any big red flags here? The way that our system works currently, can these things actually connect in this way? And now more dot voting. So again, however many nested objects there are, give about 1/3 of the dots for voting. Have participants vote on the most important relationships and figure out which ones are going to survive. Okay, so decider is going to approve those surviving nested objects. Potentially dot vote twice. So first for the must-haves and the second for these could be interesting for more research. Like, I like this, but I'm just not sure about it. Research, we should ask more questions about really digging into the user's mental model and how these things actually connected in the context of our solution, of our product. Okay, now that you have that, you're going to go behind the scenes again as the as the OOUX lead, maybe with a few of your designers as well. And so together, or just for the OOUX lead, give everybody else a break, convert that prioritized nested object matrix into a nav flow diagram. So yeah, for the certified strategists, for those that have been through the masterclass, what? Going straight into the nav flow? Yes, we're mixing things up here. So bringing it into the nav flow so we can start getting that beautiful mental picture of how everything is connecting. We start seeing that. We actually start seeing the system come alive, and we start seeing how that contextual navigation is going to work. We haven't even gotten to CTAs yet. I know. And then after I give you an hour to do that. It's probably plenty of time, maybe an hour and a half. And then going into a review at the end of the day. So reviewing the nav flow, walking through it, and hopefully getting approval from the decider. If you're really fast in whatever your tool is for doing these nav flows, you might actually have a few versions to show, okay? So you might say, this is an object-based navigation. Let me try out a verb-based navigation, or even an attribute or an adjective-based navigation. Let me play around also with some of those detail pages and how those detail pages might work. So you might have a few versions that can go into that review and you can get feedback on. All righty. Wednesday is CTAs. Okay, so now we're in the C of the ORCA process on Wednesday. So you're gonna start seeing a pattern here. Okay, so you start the day, half-hour lecture, introduction to CTAs. What are CTAs? What are roles versus personas? What are strong and weak CTAs? Objects versus roles. Oh my gosh, you know that'll come up. So, doing any kind of brief explainers on, okay, when is a role an object? When is a role not an object? Then going into role identification. So the OOUX lead should probably come to this discussion with a suggestion on the roles. But for the week overall, you probably don't want to tackle, I would say, more than 3 roles. I think 2 is great, but you might need 3, right? And you might also want to discuss if you know that there's going to be a lot of automated stuff happening, will the system be a role? So if the system feels like it's doing stuff, will you consider that as a role to analyze? I know a lot of OUXers really like doing that. I have played with that before. It is very interesting. You probably have an end user. You'll probably have some sort of admin at least, maybe a content creator, maybe even you have 2 different end user roles as well. So like in my ed tech world, teacher and student, of course, were roles. So decide on your roles. Just make sure you're really clear on the roles. Giving examples is good as well. And then after role identification, go behind the scenes. I give you about a half hour here for CTA matrix prep. So this is where you spin up some CTA matrices, especially if you decide to break people out in groups, where you get the roles set up and you get the objects in there. So the CTA matrix, I told you I wasn't going to tell you what it is, but it's objects by roles in a matrix, and then you're figuring out all the CTAs. What does this role do to this object? And you're basically brainstorming at the intersections. It's good also to have a few if there is a current state or just kind of no-brainer CTAs, go ahead and put a few in there to kind of grease the wheels, break the seal, so to speak. And then this is probably at the end of the morning. You're going to be right before lunch. You're going to be going into the CTA matrix, probably just an hour for this, maybe 90 minutes, where your groups are going to brainstorm CTAs for various roles on those objects. This can be one large group, or this can be smaller groups of 2 to 3 people. So you can pair up for this. And then it might also be a good idea to start tagging some of those CTAs as whether they're current state or conceptual. You can do that as well, or any other kind of metadata that you need to add to those CTAs that make sense for your project. After you get those CTA matrices, or it might just be one matrix that everybody is working on together, that's totally fine too. You probably are going to need to clean it up a little bit. So giving a bit of behind the scenes time, whether you're consolidating multiple CTAs. If you're not, you might be able to go straight into CTA Survivor. So Maybe there's a little bit of behind the scenes time just for the OOUX lead to clean things up. But near middle of day, after lunch, going into our CTA Survivor, where we basically are going to review all those the consolidated CTA matrix, discuss any questions that came up from the OOUXer, like looking through everybody's CTA matrices. This is another thing to give devs veto power on, like before we dot vote, like, is there anything that just like you just want to take off the table because it's just doesn't make sense from a development perspective? Debate if needed, and then go into dot voting again with that 1/3 rule. So again, consider doing this 2 times. First, do a round of dot voting for the must-haves, and then do another, this could just be a discussion, or it could be another round of dot voting where you identify CTAs that need more research, especially, those might be conceptual CTAs or even current state CTAs that you're actually not sure, like how much do people actually care about this? So that can be a really good opportunity to identify those points where you need to bring it back to research. So decide which CTAs are going to survive, and decide who's going to make the final call. Now we're going into the afternoon. It's a big day where you're probably you might want to go behind the scenes. If you're using our whimsical template, you don't need to pull this into a spreadsheet. Depending on what tool you're using, you might just be able to do these, what's coming up, the object-oriented user stories. You could use a spreadsheet for that. So we can link to our Google spreadsheet template. We'll link to that for you. So you might want to pull it into a spreadsheet, or if you're using the whimsical template, we'll also link to that. You can just do it right there on those cards when we get into the object-oriented user stories. So anyways, you might need about a half hour between CTA Survivor and object-oriented user stories just to clean up and get set up for that. Transferring it into a spreadsheet, or maybe not. You're going to need a place to add the why and the when for each of your CTAs, each of the surviving CTAs. So what you're doing here, this is in group work. This can be in smaller groups, or this can be a larger group discussion. Discuss and document the whys and the whens of each prioritized CTA. So the why, this is the user motivation. What is their reason in the world to do this thing? And don't stop at your first answer, okay? Ask why. You don't have to ask why 5 times, like Simon Sinek wants you to do. Ask why at least twice. So if you say, delete account might be a CTA. Okay, they want to delete their account because they no longer want to be a user within our system. That is not a good why. Why do they not want to be a user in our system? Why are people deleting an account? So, or even something as simple as liking a post. Why? Let's think about Instagram. Why do you like a post on Instagram? Because I want to add a heart to it? That's not a very good why. So you better believe Instagram probably has really good insight onto user motivations and why we actually like stuff. For social acceptance, to be seen, right? All those good reasons that we like things on Instagram, right? Versus bookmarking. Why does somebody bookmark something on Instagram versus liking something? So we want to get really intimate with that why, and realize when we are totally articulating on top of assumptions. Okay, you definitely want your researcher here, okay, because this is a great place to identify CTAs, identify actions that users are taking on objects that you actually have no freaking idea why they're doing it. This could be a current state thing or a future state thing, and you realize, like, well, we need to keep it in because it's current state, but we don't really understand why people are doing that. Why are people deleting accounts? Why are people bookmarking these things? How are they actually using this feature? So articulate the why, flag any assumptions, right? And also the when. So the when and the why, this is a big, a big confusion point is within all of my training is the difference between the why and the when. And it is kind of difficult when you're trying to write it out, and they do sort of blur together. The why is that motivation. The when is the context. So what is going on with the user when they're doing this thing? What is going on in their life? What is going on in the system even? This can be as rubber hits the road as what are the prerequisites? where does this fit into the overall journey? Or even you're getting it thinking, maybe even thinking a little bit about flows, okay? What has to happen before this happens? What happens after this happens? So you were just talking just a sentence or two about the overall context of what's going on in the user's world and what's going on within the system. Okay. And this basically gives you all the pieces you need for that object-oriented user story. So as a X user, I would like to do X to a certain object, right? We want to include our direct object, making it object-oriented because of this motivation. And then one thing that is not in a lot of user stories is that context. Okay. So you can fill in the sentence there. And now you have what is being done, to what, by who, why is it happening, and when is it happening? And that is gold. That is a lot of clarity right there. And you're just doing this for those prioritized CTAs. And again, you're coming up with loads of questions. All right, Thursday. We're at Thursday here. Okay, so Thursday is for attributes, the A of ORCA. And we're going to start out with an introduction to attributes, right? Quick half-hour lecture just to get everybody ramped up. Metadata versus core content. We're not going to be a huge stickler about that. We want people to understand, but if people are putting, whether it's on whether it is on objects are on blue, right? Whether it's on a pink or a yellow sticky note, it's not going to, you can fix that later, right? Because you know the difference. But a brief introduction to metadata versus core content, sorting and filtering. A lot of folks are not going to understand the difference between sorting and filtering. This is a good time to introduce that. And it's a really good time to, if you haven't already, introduce shapeshifters and really showing the why it's so important to be really clear about our attributes and really clear about the prioritization of attributes so that we can go into design confidently and avoid shapeshifting. All right. So after we have our little brief introduction, you might want to do some object mapping prep. Actually, let's switch that. Do the object mapping prep first and then do the introduction so that you're all in the same room, right? Let me switch these right here. Okay, on the fly. So object mapping prep first, okay? So set up our object map with our blue sticky notes across the top, our title and name cards with those instance examples in there. If you want to include definitions somewhere too, so like a little bit of an object guide too, embedded in your object map. Our prioritized nested objects can be transferred over to this too, and then fill in a bit of kind of no-brainer bits of core content and metadata, just stuff that is going to be there, just again to kind of grease the wheels. So it feels like it's already started, right? And you have some example pieces in there. All right, now we're going to do our introduction to attributes after you've done your prep work, and then go into object mapping. I have 2 hours blocked out for object mapping here. But it could take 3, right? You might be ordering lunch this day if y'all are in the same room, which I hope more and more people are. We could, with the object mapping, there's a couple of different ways you could do this. So I've done this before where everybody just kind of does their solo, quick, heads down brainstorm first, and they just kind of jot down all attributes for each object. And then we discuss them, and then the OOUXer is kind of the owner of the object map, and they're putting stuff on as they're hearing it called out. Or you can just have a board, and everybody just goes and takes it and runs with it and starts putting sticky notes up on it, whether that's a physical board or a digital board. If it is digital, then you can also break up into groups where you kind of have your starter kit object map and you let everybody break up into groups, add attributes. That does require some synthesis afterward before you get into attribute survivor. You're going to have to synthesize that if you do have multiple object maps, but there is a lot of value to that. That does turn into a bit of a longer day. Again, if you have a bigger group, you're just going to move slower. You're going to want to break out into separate groups and then have to synthesize. So just take that into consideration. Moving into attribute survivor, this is where we're going to review the object map. You want to bring the decider in. If I didn't mention it already, always in the survivor. So the decider needs to come in because they're going to be the final say, right? So you review the object map, discuss any questionable attributes. This is another good time to give devs any veto power on any attributes that just need to be phase 2 because we don't have that information. This is also a good time if you have a lot of objects that are generated, that are not user generated, that are generated by content creators within your system. Get those content creators in there. Do they need to veto any core content that is not realistic? Like somebody stuck a video clip on an object that has 3,000 instances. Like, no, we don't have video for that. And we are not going to be having video in the next year for that. So bringing those folks in, if that makes sense. Review criteria for prioritizing an attribute. This is probably important for every single survivor step, but it really came to mind thinking about attribute survivor. So for attribute survivor, you really want to review the criteria for prioritizing an attribute. So you want to make it clear what it means when you are highly prioritizing an attribute. It means it's going to be showing up on the card as well as the detail page. Attributes that are farther down the list that are not getting prioritized are attributes that might be one click away. So they might not show up on that card representation. The user would have to click into a detail page to see that attribute. Also with metadata, help people keep in mind that any piece of metadata that you see as being used as a sort or a filter should probably be prioritized because you want it to show up on that card, right? It would be weird to filter or sort by price on Amazon and then not see prices on those product cards, right? If you're sorting or filtering by that piece of metadata, you probably want to be able to display that metadata on the card. Thus, it probably needs to be prioritized. So you're thinking about sorting and filtering at this point too. So again, rule of a third, give out the dots, dot vote on the attributes, and then reorganize the object map based on the dot voting, eliminating any attributes that need more research or that can be deferred to phase 2. And then you've got a prioritized object map and you've got object-oriented user stories. All right, you got a lot. You got a lot to go on, get ready for Friday. Hopefully your decider approves that object map and says, yes, move forward. It has my blessing. And then you go into Friday. So Friday, the only prep work is to print out your OOUX style sketch worksheets, which we can link to in the show notes as well. We will give you those templates. So we got sketch sheets for sketching out cards and details and lists. So you'll start off with you have those printed out or you have them disseminated. Or you sent them out and everybody's printed them at home. If you're doing this remotely, you can totally do this remotely. Sending them out as a PDF. I've even mailed these to people. So I print them out and mail them as the OOUX lead. You might be doing that. Fun thing to do. So everybody has their sketch sheets. Do a quick introduction to OOUX style sketching, about a half hour on Friday morning. Congratulate everyone for getting this far. Review those unintuitive objects again. Review your masked objects, review shapeshifters, review isolated objects and broken objects, just to refresh everybody's memory on what we're trying to avoid. You can talk people through masked, especially as masked objects and shapeshifters. If you review anything, just make sure you review those. And it happens. People can have it in their head and they'll still throw a shapeshifter and they'll still sketch out masked objects. So making sure we're trying to make sure our objects are really recognizable and really distinct and really distinct from each other and consistent within different variations within an object. Review what a card is, a detail, a list, even landing page examples too. Then we go into sketch vignettes. So I've got 2 hours blocked out for this, and this is where we do rounds of sketching cards and details and lists. So rotate objects. So everyone does a round of sketching for three to four objects. So for example, a sketch vignette, you would do your card, your detail, and your list. About 15 to 20 minutes of sketching, which is really fast for people. So it's going to have to be low fidelity. If you're doing this in person, Sharpie markers, or I like to use those. I just get packs of those Crayola black markers. So it's just like a Sharpie, but it doesn't stink. So you can't really get into a whole lot of detail, right? So people aren't spending too long. So about 15 to 20 minutes for each sketch vignette, and that will be an object, and you can either assign objects or say, okay, we're all going to do the location object. We're all going to do the speaker object, and now we're all going to do, so you can do it object by object, or you can say, you do the speaker object, you do the location object, and you do the talk object, and then we'll rotate, right? So you can do it whichever way you think sounds more fun. 20 minutes of sketching, and then about 5 minutes of just quick discussion. Just kind of showing your sketches, how'd it go, save the larger discussion for the sketch review, okay? Why didn't I call it Sketch Survivor? Should we call it Sketch Survivor? Let's call it Sketch Survivor. I'm changing it right now. Survivor. Fun. Okay, so wait to discuss until you get to Sketch Survivor. That's when you'll discuss it even more. So I've got that. That would be probably after lunch. So you've done a bunch of sketching all morning. After lunch, Sketch Survivor. So as the OOUX lead, you might be helping kind of organize this, but post up the sketches in a grid on a huge wall, or you can scan it in and do it in a large digital canvas. Put your objects in columns, and then have rows for cards, details, and lists, okay? So you kind of have another matrix going on. Cards, details, and lists down the y-axis, and then objects across the x-axis. And now discuss the best ideas. How you frame this conversation, I don't have a whole lot of direction for you here. You can have each person present their sketches, or you can just have everybody look at those sketches and start highlighting, marking them up, putting sticky notes on the things that they really like. You can dot vote sketches. I don't know. I've actually never done that before. So let me know if you do that. But maybe just I've done sticky notes where like you just write a note about something that you really like about a sketch. And basically just making a big old mess on top of these sketches to help the best ideas and the best layouts emerge and bubble up to the top. So that after about 2 hours of this, that's how much I blocked out just for going over the sketches, maybe even making new sketches, doing some whiteboard sketches on the side, but really kind of highlighting, okay, what does everybody really like about these sketches? What's not working here? Is there any kind of like UI thing that we just really haven't worked out that we really need to think about more on? You might be identifying those too. And then in the afternoon, okay, so this is a long day, I've got prototyping. So you're going to have to get your fastest prototyper. Hopefully with those, and I have built a prototype in an hour and a half. I built a prototype in 45 minutes before based on sketches though. So it can be done, especially if you have a design system already and you can just use your design system and you're just super fast and you take those sketches, turn it into a clickable prototype that afternoon. And then the last step is reviewing that prototype. So celebrate, you made it this far. If at all possible, that prototype should definitely be mobile first, mobile only at this point, most likely. Even if your system is never going to see the light of day on mobile, just start out on mobile, because if it works well with, you're not thinking too much about layout, it goes so much faster as far as prototyping. And if it works on mobile, it's going to work really great on desktop, right? When you just have more room to play around with. So get it on people's devices if you can send out a link so everybody can start playing with it and walk people through it if you need to walk through it. You can even do some testing, some internal testing if you have a little bit of a scenario already thought through. You can talk everybody through that, see what goes wrong, see what people like, and basically you're ready to test with users. You might have to tweak it a little bit more to build out some scenarios. So I would not schedule testing for Monday. I would schedule testing for like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of the next week, right? So that you have that Monday and Tuesday to do any refinements, have any more discussion. But really, you also have the other amazing thing about this is you have this laundry list of amazing questions to feed back into user research. So questions that really get to the heart of complexity. For lack of a better metaphor, just questions that are like scalpel questions instead of sledgehammer questions that just go right into what it is that you're missing from users and getting clear on any unknown those unknown assumptions that came up through this process, connections between objects that you didn't quite understand, information that you're not sure if a user needs. So it just makes for really, really great detailed user interviews, the questions that come out of this process. Really effective user interviews. So, that was a lot, right? I hope you're really excited about giving this a try. Again, please send feedback. You can get me on a good old Twitter at Sophia VUX. You can also email hello@rewiredux.com to send feedback there. I love a good Loom video. Any ways to communicate to me how this went, how you modified it, what went well, what didn't work, where was my timing estimates right and wrong. Again, I've done this lots and lots of times, but in this particular format, I feel pretty confident that these are good timings, time frames, but you might have other thoughts on that. So let me know how it goes. Super excited to hear back from you. And I will talk to y'all in a few months. I am going to be working on some other projects that I'm so excited about. Please stay in touch on the OOUX newsletter, OOUX.com/newsletter, so that you know when all that cool stuff is coming out, like Crosslink and the collab with Joe Natoli, FAQs that are coming out. We're making an FAQ repository, probably on YouTube or something like that. Lots of cool stuff coming in the world of OOUX. So thank you so much for listening. If you're still listening to this, awesome. Hi. Thanks so much for listening and have an awesome summer. Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit objectorientedux.com/podcast for show notes. Our soundtrack is Fighter by Ruby Bell, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Happy OOUXing!